The Deer Valley Airport is the busiest general aviation airport in the world, with private planes, flight schools, air ambulances, and helicopters. It can be noisy, and people who live around here say they understand that. But there's one type of aircraft that stands out, according to noise complaints submitted to the airport authority and people who spoke to Arizona's Family Investigates.
It sounds like you're watching a war movie, actually.
People like Kyle Andreyko.
I have signs on the walls, pictures on the walls that'll rattle.
Andreyko lives in a neighborhood just south of the airport. His beef is with the law enforcement helicopters that routinely fly over his neighborhood, right over his house.
Instead of going straight for another 2 blocks, then they just come and they bank over the house, which is the loudest noise that they make.
He says it happens all day and all night, as many as 40 flights in a 24-hour period.
Hey, what do you know? Here they come now.
It happened during our interview.
That's DPS.
That's DPS right over your house.
Yes. That's in 911AZ right there.
The problem is they're really not supposed to do this. According to this FAA flight pattern diagram, helicopters, including police helicopters, are supposed to leave the airport and follow 7th Avenue south, then go east or west once they gain altitude. That makes them less noisy on the ground. Phoenix police told us their aviation unit follows strict FAA rules when flying in and out of the airport. But flight tracker websites show their helicopters routinely fly over Andreyko's neighborhood instead of flying out to 7th Avenue and down. It's like they're cutting the corner or taking a shortcut.
It interrupts sleep patterns. It interrupts daily work-life patterns.
Scott Fischler lived in the neighborhood last year while he was taking classes at ASU. He bought a decibel meter to find out how loud the chopper noise was.
And so I was working on my classwork from home, and sure enough, here comes a helicopter blasting over at 75 or 80 decibels at 3, 4 in the morning, right over our rooftops.
80 decibels is as loud as a blender or garbage disposal.
They come through low and loud all times of the day.
Kyle Andreyko says he reached out to Phoenix police and the other agencies multiple times. Things would get better, then would go back to the way they were. In January, he wrote what he admits was an angry email to Phoenix police. Were you threatening them?
No, sir. I can honestly say not a chance of that.
Days later, he received a visit from police.
The one gentleman goes over and he knocks on the trailer door.
Surveillance video shows police showing up on 2 occasions, looking around, knocking on the door, then leaving. Did they ever leave a note or anything?
Not a card, not a note, not another follow-up, nothing.
Phoenix police told us they were trying to provide Andreyko understanding on how the FAA creates and establishes the flight paths after he sent an email outlining his concerns. Andreyko believes the department was trying to intimidate him from speaking out.
Nicole Kreitz and Morgan Lowe live from the First Alert Desk in our AZ Family newsroom. You've just been watching the story. You've been working on this for some time.
A couple months.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I was pretty fascinated to see how you guys were able to get access to the flight paths. Is that a database that anyone could get, or?
Yeah, so these are websites that are out there because, there are tons of people who are really interested in tracking airplanes and that kind of thing. And so there are multiple websites that use available data, and you can just track if you have a tail number, where the flights go. And so, this is available to anybody.
Well, it's an interesting conversation because when you talk about police helicopters, I mean, people have like neighborhood apps, right? And they'll say, oh, we just heard a police chopper. Maybe they're looking for a bad guy or something. They are loud. They can be a little scary. You said you even heard from a school that's in that area, and they said that it is disruptive to class.
It's a tough story because, police helicopters are absolutely critical.
Sure.
And they're absolutely necessary. And we've all heard them overhead, and they're loud. The issue that these people have is that when they're taking off from Deer Valley Airport, they're pretty low by the time they hit this neighborhood, so they're a little louder even than they would be, over Central Phoenix or in a suburb. And that they're cutting that corner. It appears that they're cutting that corner. So we've heard from people who live there, people who work at the school that's right by there. They even said, I got an email this morning and they said it's disruptive to learning, and the kids sometimes get scared. It's really loud there. And I don't know that there's any one solution, but certainly if the helicopters follow that path more often, it will reduce the number of complaints.
And I was kind of fascinated by this because you see the map, and I think we've got a graphic for it if we want to pull that up, that you guys put together of like mapping out the route that the FAA wants them to take down 7th Avenue versus the kind of cut through of the neighborhood. But you said this is really just like a 2-block difference. That's all we're talking about here.
Yeah, so when a helicopter is that low and overhead, if it's a block away, there's a big difference than it is if it's right overhead. And that map that you talked about is up right here. So you can see these squares are the landing and takeoff zones for Phoenix PD, DPS, Maricopa County Sheriff's offices up on the right. And then those black lines are the runways. So what they're supposed to do, and this is from the FAA, is sort of go south at a diagonal until they hit 7th Avenue, follow 7th Avenue south, and that sort of goes between two neighborhoods. And then once they hit the 101, they're a little higher, and then they can go off in any direction. And what they are accused out to something. So exigent circumstance, absolutely. And another situation I heard when I spoke to a helicopter pilot, sort of on background, is that sometimes one of the helicopters will be coming down 7th Avenue, so the other one has to go a little bit away and maybe cut that corner. So those are real situations where there's going to be no getting around annoying people who are on the ground because they have to go over the neighborhood. But what we found when we looked over a couple months worth of these flight trackers is that they're just doing it a lot.
Okay, is it a FAA mandate? Is it a guideline? Is it a suggested route? How does the FAA qualify this?
And so this is a situation, this story, where I have to tell you, I'm not positive. We've reached out to everybody we can reach out, and we seem to be getting a different answer from each person. I reached out to the FAA and I said, what's the flight path? And so they sent me that map and they said, that's the accepted flight path. If you look at the pilot guide for Deer Valley, it shows something a little bit different, but it does say with helicopters, avoid neighborhoods. But then you talk
made evident in their training for landing or taking off from Deer Valley Airport, right?
Yeah, so what I'm getting from the pilots is that this is not a mandate to fly down 7th Avenue, and that they pretty much can go anywhere in that area that they believe is safest for them. So it is, it's an odd story where we're showing there's this problem. We don't know what the actual solution is, if there's a solution. This is what we do know. Anytime the FAA or an airport changes the flight path, it sends helicopters, planes over different neighborhoods, and they get more complaints. And everybody hates aircraft noise over their area. One of the pilots that I spoke to said, look, the result may be to completely take away that 7th Avenue FAA flight path and just have them go, where they think they're the safest, because that would spread the helicopters out
maybe so.
over the area more instead of just in that area. I don't know if that's something that's even realistic. But the other thing that I will tell you is near Deer Valley, there aren't a lot of neighborhoods to the south of there. There's a lot of industrial areas. There's an old landfill. So unfortunately, when those helicopters making that cut, they're really going over one of the only neighborhoods there.
A path of least resistance, if you will. This is going to be something that comes up because we've been talking about Tempe voters, and it's in litigation right now. Should they build that huge sports and entertainment development in the heart of Tempe, which the city of Phoenix is suing because they said, look, we've already been through this. People don't want homes near the Sky Harbor flight path, so that's just a whole other thing, and they're trying to prevent those homeowners from that Tempe area or development from future homeowners saying, I didn't sign up for this, or I don't want this noise.
You live near an airport, it is going to be noisy, and we've looked at a lot of noise complaints for helicopters, for planes, and doing our research here. Tempe accounts for a lot of noise complaints against Sky Harbor Airport already.
So we'll just see what happens with that development. Real quickly, I do want to ask, because this one particular homeowner makes some interesting allegations, and you said choppers are louder than maybe commercial jets when we're talking about houses and noise and stuff like that, just the actual liftoff and low altitude.
Yeah, where
he was claiming that it was shaking pictures on the wall. Do you have any evidence of that, or did you even see the letter that he sent in for his initial complaint?
So yeah, he sent us video of at night inside and outside his home, and I believe that it is very loud there. He is an interesting character because he is vocal, and he admitted that he lost his temper and he sent off this email to Phoenix police. I've heard from other law enforcement agencies that have helicopters. They all know who he is. He admits that he's vocal. Police showed up at his house. They say the police department says they went there to explain the flight path to him. We don't know. He believes that they were there to get him to back off, or as retaliation for this, so-called email.
But they didn't leave a business card or anything.
Didn't leave a business card. I asked him if he made a threat. He said no. He didn't get arrested. He hasn't been arrested. He doesn't have a criminal record that we were able to find. So, you're allowed to be rude to people.
Yeah.
Bad language is protected by the First Amendment. So we don't know the full story of what happened there.
And they did respond to his email, and
they've gone back and forth.
Okay.
And I did fill out a records request for that incident. It hasn't been filled yet, but when it does and we see if there's anything else, we'll absolutely report it.
Do you have any idea which jurisdiction has the most complaints? Because, PPD, MCSO, DPS, and then the air ambulance. So which is the worst offender? Any idea on that?
Well, when you look at the number of complaints that are lodged at the airport, the latest year that we saw was 2019. The Airport Authority is getting us more data on that. It just says police. When we talk to the people there, and the people who track the flights, they say it's Phoenix PD simply because Phoenix PD has more helicopters, it's a bigger fleet, it's the bigger department. So you totally understand that.
By sheer volume.
I will point out that when we contacted Phoenix Police about this, and then in the next week we looked at the flight tracker, it does look like their helicopters are following that FAA flight path a little more closely than they were in the time before.
And I know that the man you interviewed said when he makes complaints, they kind of adhere to it for a stint, and then they kind of go back to the ways again. Is there a designated ombudsman if people have complaints for this kind of noise that they're supposed to go through first?
I don't know that there's any one. You can reach out to the police jurisdiction, you can reach out to the airport, and you can reach out to the FAA. Those are three agencies there that take in complaints.
It's interesting because I think everybody has heard a police helicopter at some point. Probably, I mean, in most cases, statistically, maybe you've heard it in your neighborhood or as you're driving through an intersection or something, and it is something that certainly you take note of. But if it's happening at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 2 in the morning, or things like that, I'm sure it would be something that you'd like. Can we get to the bottom of this?
Yeah.
Can we find a solution?
Yeah.
So
And I feel for the people there. I understand the police point of view. This is a
Yeah.
story. I don't know that there's a total solution to the story, but maybe if that FAA guidance were more clear to the pilots,
Right.
maybe that would make things better.
very interesting conversation to be had for sure. Morgan, thank you for the investigation, and I know you'll keep us posted if you learn anything new about those, get any more clarity, I should say, from the FAA. Certainly it sounds like those pilots would be welcoming it as well. Okay, thanks for tuning in for this update from the First Alert desk in our newsroom, and we'll have the full story for you tonight at
6:30 and 9.
Okay, we'll see you then. Thanks.